I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Good to see you today. There's, I love film. I love documentaries. I love learning. And so one of my favorite guests on the program over the last almost 5 years now is a gentleman named Timothy Mahoney, and he has a series of documentaries called Patterns of Evidence. And they're fascinating. I really enjoy them. And I'm looking forward. I haven't gotten to see the new one, but there's one that is coming into theaters this week. The 13th, 14th, and 17th, which is this Wednesday, Thursday, and then Sunday. You can actually see it on the big screen, take a group, make a big deal of it, and support good Christian documentary making at the same time. You won't be disappointed. I can say that based on, the patterns of evidence of the wonderful documentaries he's made. So I have confidence. And so this new one is called The Israel Dilemma. And by the way, if you're catching this after it's already in theaters, I'll throw up the website right now. It's patternsofevidence.com. You can go check out all the films there. So that's a great place for you to know. The new one, though, The Israel Dilemma, coming in theaters. Love for you to get out there and see it. We're going to talk with Timothy Mahoney about it. And I think we should roll. By the way, welcome, Timothy. Good to see you again.
Hey, it's great to be on, Randy. Thanks for having me.
You want to talk about it, or you want to hit the trailer first and let them get
Let's
a
hit
little
the trailer.
Let's
Yeah,
hit the trailer.
let's do
Okay.
that.
All right. Here is the trailer for The Israel Dilemma. You can see it this week.
But your name shall be Abraham.
I also antagonized a lot of people by recognizing the state of Israel as soon as it was formed.
Where is your title to the land? He said, he held up the Bible and he said, here's the title. You don't lose your right to your home because somebody kicked you out.
The Torah came before the land. It's not by accident.
Patterns of Evidence Foundation presents
The covenants are what holds the storyline together.
a film that asks if God made a covenant with the children of Israel.
God's covenants are everlasting. There will be other things disappearing from the natural cosmos before I break my covenant. I will never break my covenant.
The God of Israel cares about all human beings, and therefore in the caring for Israel, he's expressing his love and concern for all humanity.
What evidence remains today?
Well, David is part of the history of early Israel, which has been maligned for some time because there was not solid archaeological evidence. That's all changed in the last decade.
Debate rages over the truth of biblical prophecy.
So they collect all these traditions, stories, myth, theological stories, and so on. We are dealing with traditions.
The scriptures predict events hundreds, sometimes thousands of years off into the future, and they do so with a reliability that is breathtaking.
What will the pattern reveal?
If they break the covenant, there are consequences.
That's right. Before you get out of the Pentateuch, the whole basic plot line is there.
Patterns of Evidence, The Israel Dilemma.
All right, there it is. This week in theaters, patternsofevidence.com. You can find out how to get tickets and locations as to where that is screening. Oh, right, Tim. You're jumping into the fire on this one. This is a hot topic. What made you decide to go this direction?
Well, what happened was in 2007, I ended up really having a sense I needed to go to Israel. I was making the Exodus film, and that film I thought was done. And in a meeting we had to do public relations, an event happened that told us, okay, we're not finished with this. We have to go to Israel. And when I got there, I guess I was bold enough to say, I want to talk to the leaders of your nation. And I ended up, I don't know how it happened, but they lined him up. And I got into the Knesset and went to see Benjamin Netanyahu. He was in between being a prime minister at that time. And then I went to Shimon Peres, and I think at the time he was the president of Israel. And then a number of other really important interviews that I got. And that was sitting in the can for quite a while. And I'd used little pieces here and there. But when this happened this last year in October, when the attack happened, and then when you saw what happened, also the anti-Semitism uprising on college campuses around the nation, I just felt responsible. I had these interviews. I said, doesn't anyone understand the biblical, historical storyline here? And that's the reason why this film came into being.
So, how far did you go? I'm just curious. What will we see? Obviously, we see the leaders of the modern Jewish state, some historians, some Bible prophecy people. Did you talk to anyone sort of on the other side, whether they're, I don't know, Arabs or maybe people who view prophecy more as fulfilled than in our future?
Well, what I ended up doing is what we could see is we created another pattern. And the reason why we use patterns is that patterns are a tool from a scientific standpoint. You're looking for more than one thing, and we're also looking for more than one thing in a sequence. In this particular film, we begin with this understanding. We actually start in the story of Genesis from creation, and we tell the story of Adam and Eve and the fall. And we end up telling it all the way through Noah and the ark and the destruction, and then the Tower of Babel. And that leads us to Abraham. And Abraham is called out to be, and God calls him and makes a covenant with him. And then later on, as I've been investigating, and these films on the Exodus and the Moses controversy and the Red Sea crossing and Mount Sinai, all these films, what you realize is that the Bible tells us that at Mount Sinai, the Israelites make a covenant. They make this covenant with God. They marry God. And so that's what we're looking for. Can we find evidence of this? And Moses is the author, which I believe is, he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, also to Jewish people, called the Torah. And in that, he basically says, if you obey God and keep this covenant, there's going to be blessings. But if you don't obey God, there's going to be curses. And he says, guess what? You will have a kingdom in the future, but I'm telling you in advance, you're going to disobey God, and this is what's going to happen. He says, first of all, so we're looking for a kingdom. We're looking for this kingdom, because they disobey, it's going to be destroyed. Then the people are going to be scattered. They're going to be persecuted, but in the future, they're going to return. So there's 5 steps to this pattern. And we say, can we find any evidence of this in the world of archaeology and history?
So I was kind of surprised to hear that there were those who doubted, like, David sat on the throne of the Jewish kingdom. I mean, I guess I grew up, reading the Old Testament like the rest of you guys in the church, and never even questioned that. But what did you discover when you started looking at the Davidic kingdom?
Well, that's correct. I mean, for a long time, people, they started to become unsettled. They were looking for the Bible, and my films earlier also go through this same patterns approach. And we start to say, well, why is it that people were being critical of the Bible? In fact, they're more critical of the Bible than other things, other literature that's ancient. And the Bible needs to have like many, many sources, as opposed to something can just be at one source and we believe it. And so what we do in this film is, Dr. Randall Price has been very helpful. We start to look at, there are inscriptions, and what's amazing is that the inscriptions are coming from other kingdoms. So the Bible is getting other witnesses that are testifying to God's activity. And the House of David was discovered, a couple decades ago. But for a long time, this what's called higher criticism, which is saying that the Bible really wasn't written by Moses, and that it was written by many authors later in time, and that we take this on in this film, that they basically are suggesting that the Bible was written to give a pass to a people. And what we're going to see is that's absolutely not true. And so Randy, when I think about this interview, I just wrote a post here that's going to be going out. And there are three reasons why people need to see this film. It's going to be in theaters next Wednesday, November 13th, Thursday the 14th, and 17th is a Sunday. This film, I think, there's three reasons. One is that Israel is pretty much going to be the center of our attention because of this, it has been, and it will be because of this conflict with its neighbors. I don't see it going away very soon. So where did this nation come from? That's the first reason. Secondly, there is an amazing pattern of evidence that you're going to see for the nation of Israel. And you're going to see it from different points of view. And these other nations are testifying. And why that's important is that it kind of grounds us to say that the other part of it is prophecies. We talk, and I did a lot of recreations in this film with Isaiah and Hezekiah. Yeah. And, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. And we're going to track with this. And people are going to see this pattern that I'm going to show you. And then I'm going to show you all sorts of stems of evidences that are going to come down through that. Mm-hmm. And this is a first part of a two-part film series. This film is a completely standalone. It's, like an hour, 45, 50 minutes long. It's a complete standalone film. But this pattern repeats itself. And so the first part of it we're going to see in this one, which is taking from creation all the way up till the destruction of the first temple and the return to the land. So
of those 5 things, and I talked to Jonathan Kahn recently, and he's an interesting guy, really nice guy, by the way, really down to earth, but he looks at patterns too. And so, a lot of people think that he's like trying to predict the future. He's like, no. I'm just looking at patterns through prophecy and how they repeat themselves essentially. And we know the old phrase, history repeats itself. And I go, okay, this gives me a lot to think about. Of those 5 things though, so we have the Davidic kingdom, obviously the falling away, David was like the only righteous king out of 41, something like that. And then, the scattering of the people, Israel being conquered, Judah being conquered, and then coming back together, rebuilding the temple, setting the stage for the ultimate promise of the covenant, which was the Messiah. So, if you just read the Old Testament and into the New Testament, I think you see all those things. What do you see? Do you get into really kind of, I'm not going to ask you to predict the future, but are you seeing these patterns happening again? I guess would be my question.
Well, that's great. I've never met Jonathan Kahn, but I've been reading his books, and I'm like, wow, where does he get all this? How does he find all this?
Put him on your interview list next time. He's fascinating. He knows a lot.
Yeah, he really is. So to answer your question is that what I wanted to do was, when we were starting to work on this, Steve Law, who is my writing partner and researcher, he said, we got this repeating twice. So this is a law. And I think, in fact, I've even thought, Randy, about making a film, just looking at all the laws. God is a law-giving God. The scientists of the early ages, like Isaac Newton and these others, saw that God had these laws in the Bible, and then they started looking at the physical laws, and that's where gravity comes from, and all these other ideas. And so they said, well, how has God worked? What about things like light and speed and all these different types of laws? So when the Israelites make this covenant, the Jewish people make this covenant with God, it's a legal, I think it's a supernatural legal agreement. And that's the reason why, and by the way, they are the only nation that I know of that God basically said, these are a nation. Like at the Tower of Babel, I think there's about 70 nations that are established in the beginning, and then there's subgroups. There's a movie called The Ark in the Darkness that basically communicates that, what happened there. So, but we have this one nation, and they're the ones that we can see how God is dealing with them. And when they're outside of the covenant, they're in a very dangerous place, because then they can be killed. they can be persecuted, they can be hurt. And that's what we're seeing with the Jewish people, because no one else in the history of the world, I think, has this somewhat unnatural history of being persecuted.
Right. Yeah.
Like the Jewish people.
Yeah. Well, and not just that, but a really, I mean, you wouldn't, if you were a betting man, I wouldn't recommend it. You would not bet on Israel in so many of the past military conflicts. They shouldn't even exist today. It does confound reason in a lot of senses, right?
Right.
Right. So, but again, so are you seeing, and if you don't get into this, I totally get it, but do you think you're seeing some patterns repeated now?
Yes, and that's where we're going.
Okay.
So the first film is going to show you, like, no one has ever compiled in a full feature the pattern the first time. And we actually have a Bible study for people that are interested. If they go to the site, they can get a Bible study and they can see all the pattern. Nice. The second film is going to be incredibly, I don't want to use the word explosive, but it's going to be really powerful because of how you're going to see this. And once again, I'm just an observer. I'm just saying, okay, if I'm going to make a film and I'm going to investigate it, what would I investigate? And if I look at this covenant, then could say that's something I could investigate because it's been recorded. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We could look at that. And I was with Israel Finkelstein in Israel, interviewing him in Tel Aviv, and we talked about this. And he said, well, the people who wrote the Bible, not Moses, but he says they saw what had happened and they made this history up, in a sense, from these stories or whatever. Right. And I talked about, well, what about the covenant and the laws within the covenant? And I said, he goes, well, yeah, they made that up. I said, it's happened twice. And I'm putting that in the second film because there's no answer for that. I mean, the same thing mirrored itself. So God's laws are I believe, in place, and you're going to see that, and you're going to see that with the nation of Israel. And there's more theological things that are coming, but I know that you have a view. I'm going to look at the different eschatological views. I can almost say that word. Is that the way you say it? Eschatological. Yeah. I'm going to try to say, okay, here's one view, here's another view, and so people could understand it, because a lot of people they're just kind of the Gospels type Christian. They don't quite know much about the rest of the Bible.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that what's happening, so the three reasons I said is, one of them is that Israel is forefront in the world right now, and that's not going away.
Right.
Number two, there's an amazing pattern of evidence that you have to see here of God having a covenant with these people. And number three is that in this film, you're going to see how God can provide in supernatural ways when you are looking at a terrible situation, and that your viewers might be in a situation right now that they are discouraged, or they don't know how God's going to provide. They don't know how they're going to pay their bills. They don't know what they're going to do. And I thought, as I woke up this morning and my Bible opened up, because I sometimes feel despair, with family and different things I'm dealing with. And somehow it opened up to Isaiah and to the story of Hezekiah. And if you don't know this story, this king, Sennacherib, had come, and he was like the top of the game for an army, and he was wiping out kingdom after kingdom. And Sennacherib comes and he wipes out Judah, which is I think it was Judah. I think he wrote, it was Israel. He wiped up all of Israel, and so all these cities are falling, and all the neighboring communities were falling. Yeah. And he gets to Jerusalem, and they start mocking God, and they say, "Listen, these other gods, we burned them all. Mm-hmm. Your God, don't depend upon your God. He's not going to save you. We're going to, if you don't surrender, it's going to be really bad." And so King Hezekiah, so I did this all in recreation, Randy. And I don't think anyone's ever done this before, but I show him, we had a special temple, made, and see Hezekiah calling out to God. He's calling out to God for deliverance. He's not going to yield. we're in a lot of us are in that place. My mother, my father was a former police officer, and he had a lot of PTSD from the war. And my mother cried out to God many times because of his violent, demons that were following him. And I saw my mother crying out to God for protection and for safety. And so I grew up with that understanding that you could do that. And so this film, I think, is going to be an encouragement to people that when they see it, the Israel dilemma, you're going to see God's provision, and you're going to see also God's keeping his word, because this covenant is a legal agreement. And so what does that mean for us today? So in some ways, this film is a film that would open your mind and your heart and your soul up to both current events, the fact that there's a foundation of God keeping his word, and I'm going to show you prophecies, and we're going to talk about prophecy, because there are prophecies that were given then, and they seem like things are moving forward and through time. You're going to learn about prophecy. And number 3, I believe you're going to be inspired and encouraged by how God is able to do miraculous things like he did with King Hezekiah.
Yeah. And, different views on eschatology and fulfillment and things like that are very interesting to me. My Israel dilemma, a lot of it's rooted in like Romans 9 and 10 and things where you go, okay, old covenant, new covenant, fulfilled covenant through Christ, promises fulfilled, and a new and better covenant. So I wrestle with a lot of the contemporary and future kind of things. What I will say is that what you're going back and talking about with Hezekiah, talking all the way back into the Torah and things like that, I love that because it provides such a picture of God, his goodness, also of sin and it's the death that it brings, but also I think the journey that we go on in a spiritual sense, being delivered from the slavery of sin, having a destiny that is a promised land of abundance, but also having to learn lessons in the desert of trust, of obedience, of dependency on God, and also having to fight for it. It's like the promises is there. The way has been made, but we have to fight in this life to walk in the kingdom that Christ established that is an everlasting kingdom, that he said is not of this world. But the picture is right there in the Israelites. And so I do think, I know it's hard. We did a thing where we read through the whole Bible. Man, you get into Leviticus and Numbers, and it can be difficult just kind of reading through it. But to gain an understanding of what God did in the physical with those people and how that translates to the spiritual to us today, I think is hugely valuable. And so all these stories that you're telling now, I think are still relevant today, whether we can debate on what different level. There is a relevancy to every one of us today. And so I really like it. I'm curious about the title. Let me show people your website. This is patternsofevidence.com, and you can watch that trailer again. You can share it with us. You can also see all the other films that Tim has done, and I love them. I love this kind of stuff. Why did you title it The Israel Dilemma? What's the dilemma here?
Well, I that's a great question, and I have a great answer.
I knew it.
Okay. Well, a lot of people, when we looked at what happened in October, I had to make a decision what this film was going to be back in, like December, when I said we need to respond to this. The dilemma looks like Israel's in a dilemma, right? I think there's 7 different areas around their nation that are attacking them.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so, can you imagine if you were living in a? I mean, they're not even as big as my state. I'm in Minnesota. I think they're this tiny little country, this little sliver of a country. So yeah, they've got a dilemma. But there's also the question that I started realizing. We talk about laws in this. It says, the Bible says that. To Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And the question that we're raising, and we're going to investigate in the next film a lot more, is what happens to nations that have ill-treated these people. And
it never ends well. It never ends well.
yes, and so we're gonna take you through that. But guess what? Here we are. I mean, in many cases, like what just happened recently with this election, the question was, will America still support Israel?
Mm-hmm.
And, where are we at? If you look at, we're going to take you through the history of this in the next film, and you're going to see what happened to those nations. So the dilemma is also on how do we treat these people?
Yeah.
Now, that is the question. Is that as we're moving forward, and there's a verse in I think it's Zechariah that talks about the nations will surround Israel and injure themselves. Now, has that happened to
over and over again?
Yeah. So that's how that title came into being, and then we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to respond?
Yeah. Well, I mean, politically, I don't think it's any question. We support Israel. Only democracy in the region. Only place where Arabs and Jews can live together peacefully. It's not happening in the Arab countries around there. But from a spiritual standpoint, the only dilemma I would see is whether we treat the church and the current nation, modern Israel, as two separate entities, because the idea there's no Jew or Gentile in Christ. But I think the easy solution is, love your neighbor as yourself. I like Jesus said that, and that's good advice. So we should love the Jews. But I think we also need to preach the truth that the Messiah has come, and that Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. No man comes to the Father but by him. And that can be a little hard. And I've had a lot of really, I think, healthy discussions with some rabbis, some Orthodox Jews, and I from a Christian perspective, I don't want to stop either of those things. I don't want to stop loving them, and I don't want to stop proclaiming Christ to them, and that can be a little tough at times. But I do think that's our calling. So I don't know.
Well, so that's I'm going to explore those areas. So with Jewish people as well as with Palestinian people and with other people in those areas. But the film, for everyone, I think it'd be fantastic to see it in the cinema. It will be in November 13th, next Wednesday, or November 13th is Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the 14th, the Thursday, and the 17th on a Sunday. But yet, need to get your tickets early. Now, as an independent filmmaker, what happens is you can get the theater to agree to a little something, but if they don't see people buying tickets, like in advance, they don't hold the theater. So we've had it where the theater gets dropped, and people show up, and they said, hey, they weren't, they moved it. And that's just the way it is when you're a small independent. So I think it's important for us to be in theaters, because we want to have a public opportunity to continue to put biblical films and investigative films like this in a public setting. And not only that, but this is a good time to bring your friends. It might be hard to bring them to your church or your Bible study, but you can take them to a movie, buy them some popcorn, and when you're done, you're going to have an awful lot to talk about the Bible. And that's the reason why, in fact, I had members of my own family that went to see or heard about the Noah's Ark movie years ago, and that's what brought them to faith. So you can go to patternsofevidence.com, patternsofevidence.com. We also have group ticket sales that if you want, you can call. We got a person who's managing that. Bring your Sunday school class or your Bible study or your whole church. This is going to be an amazing film on many levels.
Yeah, and Tim's not just saying that for you guys out there watching or listening, to promote himself. It is the absolute truth. If you go see it in the theaters this week, it will give other people the opportunity to see it at a later point. And so you really need that early push. I mean, you read any box office report, opening weekend is like the marker for all films. And so when we support Christian films like this, we keep them in the theaters. And it's really, there's been a lot of people pave the way to even get this in the theaters, and we need to really keep that momentum in the culture. So this is not just about one film, really. This in a lot of ways is about the impact that we have on the culture. So when you go to patternsofevidence.com, pick up some tickets, take some groups, you're not just going to see a movie. You are actually making an impact in the culture. Last question for you, Tim. What are you hoping people walk out with, in addition to a conversation and a touch point to talk about this as an issue? Is there any kind of place you're trying to lead them in their thought process?
I think that what I've learned is that the deeper your understanding goes to your biblical roots, the deeper your faith is able to be. Mm-hmm. And I think what's happening now is that there's going to be, my sense of it is that there's going to be more controversy around the nation of Israel.
No doubt.
And it's going to, and I hate to say it, but I don't think it's going away. So that's the reason why this is an important foundation for people to get it, because you're not probably going to even learn it at your church as well. No one's ever really compiled. This is probably the best. Anne Graham Lotz just gave us an amazing testimony. She's the daughter of Billy Graham. And others I'm getting them from rabbis. I'm getting them from a variety of different people. This is never before has anyone ever compiled this much information in a cinematic, engaging and inspirational way. So that's what's going on right now, is that's why this is an important film. And I might just say, everyone, we all just voted, but this really is a vote for the nation of Israel to understand it better. So that's the reason why I'd like people to be a part of this.
Yeah. I assure you, there will continue to be conversations about Israel, and especially if you're a Christian, you're better off knowing what you're talking about. So run out there, patternsofevidence.com. Check out The Israel Dilemma. Check it out in theaters Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday. And again, if you're watching this after the fact, patternsofevidence.com, you can figure out if it's still in theaters or where you can see it. And Timothy, thank you. Keep making these great documentaries. Appreciate you. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, thank you. God bless.
Appreciate all you guys out there. Hit that share button. Let other people know. And if you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed, do that. We'll see you again next time on Life Today Live.